Hey everyone, so let's start this video by putting a control into place that I probably should have back in the first video, but that one was getting kind of long. So anyways, we created the variable whose turn to create a back and forth between the player and the enemy by changing the value, player and enemy. However, the code that checks for the activation of these skills, that is the player's turn, doesn't actually check for that value. So while the player enemy values do indeed trigger the enemy's turn, it doesn't actually end the player's turn. So you really got two things that need to happen. You need the enemy turn to be triggered, but you need the player to be locked out. And right now the player is not locked out. So if I click on this repeatedly, I can spam the attack. The enemy does get his attack. You could see his animations, and I took damage, but it doesn't lock me out. So if we come to our icon script, because this is what's controlling the activation of the skills, you can see that in the on mouse down section, it simply says, was the sword icon clicked? That's it. That's the only condition it's using. So we need to check for that variable, the whose turn variable. So we add a parenthesis in the front, double ampersand, and then the new condition. So game flow dot whose turn equals player. Now that in itself isn't enough because we haven't changed the value of player. So that means we need a third value because we don't want this to be player, but we also don't want it to be enemy. We want the player's turn to play out. And this gets back to what I was saying about why I don't like to use booleans. Because at first, yes, it seemed like we only needed two values. Turns out we need a third value. So if we had used the boolean, we'd have to go back and uproot all that code. Whereas here, we just check for that new value. So gameflow dot whose turn equals wait. So now, since we've turned this to wait, this will no longer be true, and the player cannot activate their attack again until the code that we already put into place changes the value to enemy, and then enemy changes back to player. So that will already cascade back to normal. Because right now, nothing's looking for wait. It's just looking to see, is anything set to player? And now let's just rinse and repeat. So we'll take this. So this is for the sword attack. This is for the fire attack. Oops, sorry, that should not be there. That should be within these. My apologies. Just get rid of that space. And we check for this additional value. Just gonna copy and paste, but remember the structure is that you have to have the whole thing surrounded by parentheses, and then each value you're checking has to be surrounded by parentheses. Heal, we worked a little bit differently. And poison, we should be able to do this with as well. So let's just put this in here. And now this will be also wait. I should go back at some point and have heal work like everything else, have like an animation play. That way it's standardized. And now we just run it. So if I rapidly click on the sword, only does one attack at a time. Rapidly click on fire, only one attack at a time. Rapidly click on poison, only one at a time. And so like that, we've now really enforced the whole player turn, enemy turn. And again, I probably should have done that in the first video to really tie up that loose end, but it's been done now. So with that bug squashed, let's begin adding some new functionality. So what we're going to create an icon over here that's going to let you use a potion, because usually in games like this, you have consumables that you bring into combat. So we're going to add a potion that lets you replenish your mana, your MP. So I added this new image, and there's nothing special about it. It's just drawn in an external paint program. Again, use whatever you want. We drag it into the scene, and we're going to align it on the right side. So since this is at -8, the one over here should be at +8. And I believe it was -4.25 for the Y coordinate, and we'll bring that up to 10 in the layer. Now, just like these, so even though it's going to be a consumable, the functionality is very similar. So add component, physics 2D, box collider, is trigger, now it's clickable. Since it's an icon, it needs the icon script. So let's put that on it. Now we're going to create a second object, a text object that's going to be aligned to the lower right corner here, showing you how many of these you have. So whenever you click on this and use one, that number will decrease. So since we're tracking a new value, that means we will eventually add a new variable to store that value. So game object, 3D object, and we go to 3D text. We'll turn this to a single digit just to make it easier for alignment. Anchor should be middle right. Although being a single digit, it doesn't make much of a difference. So character size should be 0.2. The font will be smaller than the other text, though. Let's make this like 12. That's a little too small. Let's make it like 14. There we go. And since this is text, that means it needs the text script. Okay, so now what we need to do, we can do this in either order, but we actually want the number to be on top of the icon. So since we've been putting all these at 10, we technically could bump this down to 9 for consistency, or we can just bump this up to 11. So I'll do the latter just so these are consistent. So let's go to that text script. And actually, let's rename this first. Let's call this POTS text. And now we open that script. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to change it to 11. So actually, these all could be 11 now that I think about it. So what I'd done is I'd actually put this one at 9. So let's just bump it all to 11 so there's not additional coding. We'll just put them all at 11 as far as text. So what we're going to do now, we bump the text up to 11 so it should be on top of the tile now, and on top of the icon. But we need a value or a variable to store its value. So game flow, public, static, and for consistency's sake, we will use float since we've been using floats for HP, MP, and things like that. And this will be current pots. And we'll eventually add a maximum, just as we did maximum HP, maximum MP. We'll just do current pots, but we'll eventually add a maximum. So now what we need to do is we now need to take this and we need to set the new text object equal to that. So we go to text because that's what controls text. And we just add a new one. So we'll just copy this one, paste it down here. Should not be inside of any other if, it should just be inside of the update section. And this one is POTS text. So if the object name is POTS text, we want the text to be equal to gameflow dot current pots. And it doesn't like it. I think I'd mentioned this before in the previous video about sometimes it doesn't like to turn a number into a text So you have to specifically expressly say convert it to text. So now what we need to do, we now need this value, this variable, excuse me, to be reduced whenever you click on that icon. And when you click on that icon, we then need the MP value to be increased. So now we go to the icon script because that's where we control the functionality of the icon. So similarly, not inside of a pre-existing if, we want to do, and I'll just type this out, if game object dot name equals potion icon, then we want something to happen. Also, eventually we'll check to see if this number is greater than 1. Again, I try to be iterative in nature, that you don't want to put too many conditions on. It breaks which condition is the problem. So you start with the bare minimum to make sure you've got that working. So what we want to do, we want to have the potions be decreased. So game flow dot current pots minus equals 1. So the total amount of pots has been reduced by 1 when you click on the potion icon. Second thing, we want game flow dot MP, hero MP, plus equals a certain amount, say 20. And also you want to check that you don't exceed the maximum hero MP, but again, this is iterative. We want to make sure the basics work before we start doing that. Okay, so if I have not forgotten anything, I believe that should do it, because if you click on the potion icon, current potions are reduced by 1, MP is increased by 20, and the text object should update for that new value. And now let's go back and run this. So with every click, this should decrease by 1, and this should increase by 20. And since there's no control in place, this can go into negatives. Sure enough. Okay. So now we want to put those controls into place. So we go back to icon, and what we do is, rather than just checking to see if potion icon is clicked on, we want to see if game flow dot current pots is greater than 0. Let's run that. So since there's 5 of these, this should increase by 100 total, and this should not go beyond 0. Yep, 150, and this won't go beyond 0. I'm rapidly clicking and nothing's happening. Now we just want to control the maximum, that we don't want to exceed the allowed maximum MP. And there's a few ways to do this, so I'll show you how I'm going to do it, but you're going to need to build on it eventually, because there's several decisions you're going to want to make, and they're all relative game balance decisions. For instance, some games won't let you consume something if you get no benefit from it. Like you have full MP and for some reason you accidentally click on it. Some games won't let you consume it. Other games will let you consume it. So the way we're going to do it here, it will let you consume it, but you won't exceed the max MP. So again, this is iterative in nature. We need to put a ceiling to the MP, and this will do it. But like I said, you're probably going to want to go back and tweak the coding so as that you want to check before you consume it if it has any benefit. Because usually if you can get even 1 MP, they let you do it. But if you get 0 MP, they won't let you consume it. Again, this is iterative, so we'll just put this version in place. So if gameflow dot hero MP, so the value we just increased, well, if it's greater than gameflow dot max hero MP, then we want something to happen. We want hero MP, oops, sorry, forgot myself. Hero MP is set to the maximum. Oops. GameFlow.hero MP equals, sorry, that should be max hero MP. There we go. So again, we increase the hero MP, and then we say, well, if that value is greater than the maximum, then set it equal to the maximum. That it can't be greater than the maximum, we'll just reduce it to whatever the maximum is supposed to be. Again, this will let you consume a pot even if you get zero benefit for it. And actually, let's check to see what the maximum is right now. So max hero MP is 50. Okay, so let's actually bump that up to 70 just for this test. That way we can consume one. So we should be able to consume one, it'll go to 70, it'll let us consume another, but it'll stay at 70. So click, it consumed one, went up to 70, click, it consumed one, so it's not letting you go beyond 70. And the 0 still works. So again, you're going to want to possibly tweak this depending on how unforgiving your game is, that some games let you consume even if you get no benefit out of it. Now let's add the stun attack that I mentioned in the previous video. So what we're going to do for that, we've got our lightning icon. We'll drag that into the scene, and we'll line this up with the rest of them. So order and layer 10 and negative 4.25. And I believe the difference in positioning is 1.5. Yeah, so that means this one should be -2. And now what we'll do, same that we did with the other icons, add component, physics 2D, box collider, is trigger to make it clickable. It's an icon, so it needs the icon script. Now before we continue with that, let's actually make the animation. So we go to these images. We'll just drag one into the scene. Let's position that upwards. And now we go to animation. It says animating this. So create, and this will be attack. So ATT underscore light, because I don't feel like typing out lightning every time. And then same, you just grab the images. Now this one we don't have to cycle back to the beginning. Actually, for the player text we don't. It's the enemy text that we're doing that with. So, and let's do like a sample of like 18 frames per second. As typical, we need to end the animation here. So what we'll do, we're going to click on this icon here for add event. We click on that, and we're going to add a function. We need to add the script to this first, though. So let's change this. So this is going to be light. And it needs the self-destroy script, and that is where the end animation should be. So let's go back to animation. And there it is, and ammon. And now we'll turn this into a prefab. We just drag and drop that right into the asset area. We go to our light icon, and there's the reference for the attack. Again, it's called sword attack because I didn't really have the foresight to just name this attack. You can always rename it if you want. So even though it's called sword attack, that's just because that was the first attack. I determined that we could just use the same variable for every single attack. And we now will use light. So now that we haven't done the coding yet, but it'll instantiate that. It now knows about it. Now we just have to put the instantiation in. So let's do that. Let's go back to our icon script. And we'll just let's use the sword. Just want to make sure I have this in the right place. Yep. I want to make sure this wasn't inside one of the other ifs. So this will be light icon. And it'll instantiate the sword object, well, the lightning object. So now we just need to go to self-destroy and look at an anim. So this is the main thing that we need to change. Because this automatically goes to enemy, but we said this was going to stun it. So for icon, what we need to do is we need to put a variable in here that tracks the stunning. So game flow. So yep, another variable. And you'll see that with game development, a lot of the functionality, it's just variables tracking what value something is. So public static. And this will be, I believe we can use int. Public static int, and it will be rem stuns. So how many remaining stuns? And this starts at 0. When you click on the light icon, we want gameflow.rem stuns to get bumped up to 3. And now we can make a decision based on that 3. So we go to self-destroy. This is when the stun, the lightning animation ends. So instead of saying enemy, what we'll do, we'll say if gameflow.rem stuns is less than 1, so now it's conditional. We don't just say it's the enemy's turn. We say if remaining stuns is less than 1, therefore 0, then, because it shouldn't become a negative, then it will be the enemy's turn. Else, it now becomes the player's turn again. Gameflow.whose turn equals player. So pretty easily, you can add in a stun. But we also want to make sure that this gets decreased by 1. We want the remaining stuns to be decreased. I don't know what it is today. I keep forgetting to type game flow. Sorry. So if I haven't forgotten anything, that should do it. So clicking on the icon instantiates the lightning and sets remaining stuns to 3. The animation is playing. When it self-destroys, or so I say at the end of the animation, it says remaining stuns. If remaining stuns is less than 1, then it's the enemy's turn, else it's a play a turn, but then remaining stuns gets reduced. I think that should do it. Now we haven't put the status up here yet, but you don't want to try to do too much at once. Okay, so if you notice, he did not attack. He still did not attack. There we go. So the stun is working. And we'll wrap this up by just creating a second status text to indicate that it is stunned. So we'll just copy this one, call this stat text 2. And we'll just put it above the first one. And we shouldn't have to change anything about this. It already has the script attached to it. So let's go to text. And what we'll do, let's take this one since it's for the first stat text, but we'll probably have to make some substantial changes. So if the game object is stat text 2 rather than 1, we're not going to check poison. We're going to check instead the stunned. So remaining stuns, if remaining stuns is greater than 0, then we want it to display stunned. If it's not greater than 0, then be blank. Let's see if that works. So stunned, poisoned. Now you can see though, even though it says stunned, he attacked, it's because of the way poison works. Poison isn't being processed the same way that the other attacks are, so you'll need to tweak that. But let's do that in another video. That will be like a cleanup video, and then I think we'll be just about done. As again, I mentioned in the last video, I really haven't received any requests for any functionality, so I've just kind of plotted on with the type of functionality that you typically see in turn-based RPGs. So now you have consumables, now you have the ability to stun the enemy. Again, like I said, we need to do a little cleanup for the poison. We need to standardize the way some of these worked. We kind of shoehorned them in without actually standardizing the approach. What we'll do is we'll probably add an animation for this, and then we'll standardize them so they all process the same way, and then it won't be an issue for the poison. So again, I hope that you found this helpful, and that if you have any questions, let me know. Any requests, let me know. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.